Risk assessment is a means of identifying, to start off with, risks that can potentially jeopardize your operations. We consider if there's any mitigation already in place to counteract those identified risks. Once we've considered the events occurring, the mitigation that is currently in place, our models will then allow us to pinpoint exactly where significant levels of risk occur. Once we know what those risks are, we can put in further mitigating strategies in a cost-effective environment to achieve the best risk reduction. In an ideal world, one could argue that we would spend all the money that we have to mitigate all risks, but sadly we don't live in an ideal world. We can't spend all the money in the world trying to mitigate all risks away. So we have to come up with some form of cost-benefit analysis. And that cost-benefit analysis is done within a risk framework, and that's within the as low as reasonably practicable risk framework. The ALARP principles were established in the high hazard industries, primarily nuclear, offshore oil and gas and transportation sectors. And in those sectors, various criteria have to be met for you to demonstrate that your risks of your operations are as low as reasonably practicable.
Demonstration of ALARP requires, for example, licensees of nuclear plants and operators in other industries to evaluate the risks and to consider whether it would be reasonably practicable to implement further safety measures beyond initial ideas. As mentioned, one industry that uses the idea of risk assessment and ALARP to inform decisions is the nuclear industry. And we work to identify the likelihood that certain faults will occur and cause identified risks to the operation of nuclear power plants. One group of events that is assessed for nuclear power stations is that of external hazards, which Sophie is currently working on.
The event tree here shows the fault progression after a seismic event. The seismic event is assumed to cause the reactor to trip and shut down. Failure of this is modelled by this first node. It is assumed that due to the seismic event, small bore pipework will have ruptured. This is most important in the gas bypass plant, as it could lead to the reactor depressurising due to a loss of the cooling gas. If we go to the fault tree behind this event, we can see that it considers the operator failing to recognise the fault or failing to go local to plant to isolate it. In addition, the valves used to achieve isolation are modelled. The frequencies produced by this event tree are then summed along with the results from the other event trees in the model to assess the acceptability of the station's overall risk against numerical targets.
So risk assessment and the principle of ALARP can be and should be applied to many industries as a method to determine if current safety measures are appropriate, including the nuclear industry, assessment of IT backup options, disaster recovery and process or logic engineering.